Good afternoon, and thank you for attending today's webinar. My name is Jennifer Cooley, and I am the Education and Outreach Manager for the State Historical Museum. During March, which is Iowa History Month, join us each Thursday for an Iowa History 101 webinar, which focuses on Iowa through a cultural history lens. You can learn more about this series and all of our Iowa History Month programs on our website at iowaculture.gov. Please remember to sign up for each webinar you would like to attend, and don't worry if you can't watch live, all presentations will be recorded. Today, we will learn the story of the World Food Prize Foundation and its beginnings more than 35 years ago. We will also hear about the transformation of the former Des Moines Public Library into the foundation's current home, the Norman E. Borlaug Hall of Laureates. A few housekeeping points before I introduce our speaker. Everyone came into this webinar on mute with cameras off. Closed captions are available by clicking the closed caption button on your screen. The webinar is being recorded and will be placed in the Iowa Culture page of YouTube in a few days. I have disabled the chat function, but if you have any questions, please type them into the Q&A feature throughout the webinar. My colleague Matt Beyer is watching that feature and will prepare a list of questions for the speaker at the end of the presentation, but please note, we may not be able to get to all of the questions. Now I'm pleased to introduce our speaker, Kate Levasseur. Kate is the archivist and historian at the World Food Prize Foundation. Previously, she worked at the Wells Fargo Museum in Des Moines and also Living History Farms in Urbandale. Kate has lived in central Iowa for most of her life and is a graduate of Valley High School and Drake University. Outside of work, she serves as a board member of the West Des Moines Historical Society and loves spending time exploring local parks and museums with her husband and daughter. And now I'm very happy to turn over to Kate to begin the webinar.
Thanks, Jennifer, and I'm very excited to be here for another webinar with State Historical Society of Iowa. It's always a good time. All right, so I would like to introduce my webinar today. The title is Improving the Quantity, Quality, and Availability of Food for All, the Story of the World Food Prize Foundation. Since it's a webinar, I just wanted to give you a chance to see who it is that's speaking with you today and to tell you a little bit about me beyond my resume, which you heard summarized by Jennifer so neatly. Outside of work, I enjoy genealogy and family research, both for myself and helping others. And I feel very passionate about using objects and experiential learning to connect audiences to the past. And a lot of that springs from my time at Living History Farms, getting to wear period clothing and using experiences like the wood stove to teach, especially children, but everyone, what it was like and make it a little bit more real and engaging. I'm also very interested in exploring the concept of historic cemeteries as non-traditional museums. Some of you that have joined me for previous State Historical Society webinars probably are familiar with that concept through my presentations on women buried in Woodland Cemetery and Glendale Cemetery. All right, so when I come to work, here is a little bit about the archives here at the World Food Prize Foundation. So in my role, I manage the foundation and Ambassador Kenneth Quinn archives. I handle day-to-day workings of the Laureate Society, our foundation volunteer corps. I process the collection with the help of the archives in turn. This is an ongoing process, as most archivists know. I support and collaborate with other departments within the foundation, such as our youth programming team and our comms team, our communications team. I coordinate historical tours of the Hall of Laureates, and of course, other duties as assigned, from organizing transportation during our October week of events to writing posts for our social media pages. Our collection includes the archive, which is primarily a business archive. Most of it documents the work of the foundation since the inception of the World Food Prize in 1986. Most of the items are documents and media, though like every archive, ours does have its quirks. We also have a collection of artwork. Over the years, the foundation has commissioned many pieces of art to tell important stories about agriculture and humanitarianism, both here in Iowa and around the world. From stained glass windows to paintings, nearly every space in the Hall of Laureates contains art that will both educate and inspire visitors and staff. And this might look familiar here based on the title of the presentation today, but the World Food Prize mission is to elevate innovations and inspire action to sustainably increase the quality, quantity, and availability of food for all. And so those images across the bottom, you'll see on the image on the left is from the Laureate Award ceremony. The middle image there is in our Borlaug ballroom. And on the right there is a young art appreciation moment there with one of our tiny visitors. And to really start the story properly, we've got to start by talking about Norman Borlaug. There's a picture of Norman Borlaug in the field with some of his miracle wheat, and the quotation that we have here in the rotunda that we see every day is "Food is the moral right of all who are born into this world," and that will really guide not only Norm's research, but also the World Food Prize Foundation's work. As we go through the next slides, which will summarize Norman Borlaug's life and work, I just wanted to give a note that the images you'll see are actually tapestries that we have hanging in the Borlaug Ballroom here at the foundation. They're based off of paintings by artist John Collier, which were then translated to tapestry by Magnolia Editions and were woven in Belgium. So just so you know what it is you're looking at on the side there. I will also preface by saying this is definitely not meant to be an all-inclusive version of Dr. Borlaug's life. So you feel free to, if you're curious, if this gives you any inspiration to learn more about Dr. Borlaug, even on our World Food Prize website, there's a more inclusive biography. But Dr. Borlaug was born on his grandparents' farm in 1914, and he was raised on a farm near Cresco, Iowa, in Howard County, so northeastern Iowa. School and education become a very important part of his life. His teacher at the one-room schoolhouse, which you see featured in the tapestry there, New Oregon Township number 8, was his cousin, and she encouraged him to attend high school, which was a bit of a hardship for his family in terms of losing a worker. Norm had to go stay in Cresco in order to be able to attend high school, but it was definitely a formative experience for him, both in terms of learning, and it's where he began a wrestling career that would be something he did throughout high school and college. After high school, he enrolled at the University of Minnesota, where he graduates with a degree in forestry in 1937. And he was prepared to go work for the USDA, but his job ended up getting delayed due to some congressional budgeting. And while back on campus, he decided to attend a lecture put on by Dr. Elvin Stakeman, who was in the plant pathology department. And he said that the lecture was such an impactful and life-changing moment for him that he ended up enrolling in the plant pathology program and studying under Dr. Stakeman. After graduating with his PhD, Dr. Borlaug ended up serving at the DuPont labs, and he was there for 2 years before he ended up joining a team in Mexico to work on a government and Rockefeller Institute sponsored project to work on wheat. And during his time in Mexico, Norman Borlaug and his team of researchers developed a hybrid miracle wheat. And not having an ag or wheat background, this is something that I have been very interested in learning about. So basically, one of the problems was, of course, that they needed more wheat. And the work that they did was not only to make it higher yield, but then they also ended up making it a dwarf plant. So that way the shorter stems would mean that it would be less likely to blow over or have crop loss in that way. By 1956, Mexico achieved wheat self-sufficiency. And this project ultimately ended up turning into or becoming CIMMYT, International Maize and Wheat Improvement Center, in 1966. And the tapestry you see there on the left labeled SONORA, that is representing Norm's time in Mexico. His work then took him to India and Pakistan, where he and his team bring the Green Revolution ideals to India and Pakistan. So in addition to just creating this new hybrid miracle wheat, there was also other factors here, including fertilizers and irrigation to change the yields or increase the yields here. Local scientists in the region and researchers continued developing hybrids appropriate for the soil in India and Pakistan, because of course there were different needs for the plants than there were in Mexico. Throughout the work, Pakistan is self-sufficient within 5 years. India was self-sufficient in wheat in about 10 years. During this time period is when Norman Borlaug wins the Nobel Peace Prize in 1970. There was no award specifically for agriculture or food security, so you may be able to see here where the idea starts forming for the World Food Prize. He did approach the Nobel Institute to create an award that was more focused on agriculture or food security, but the terms of Alfred Nobel's will did not allow for the creation of additional awards. As we go beyond this time period, this is definitely a summary. As we kind of wrap up here, the Presidential Medal of Freedom. So he was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1977. In 1986, the Green Revolution comes to Africa, and Norm is the president of Sasakawa Africa Association, starting in 1986, and their big project is creating quality protein maize. In 1986, and this is going to seem like a very small reference considering the nature of this presentation, but in 1986, Norm ends up starting off the World Food Prize. So it's first awarded in 1987, and then the World Food Prize Foundation begins in 1990, and we will go more in depth in this a little bit later. The first World Food Prize Youth Institute begins in 1994, and youth education on these issues and youth involvement were something that was very important to Norman Borlaug. In 2006, Norman Borlaug wins the Congressional Gold Medal. So with the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the Congressional Gold Medal, and the Nobel Prize, he becomes one of only 3 Americans to have won the trio of those awards. The others are Martin Luther King Jr. and Elie Wiesel, the Holocaust survivor and author. And then Norman Borlaug dies at home in Dallas, Texas in 2009. So like I said, that is a very brief summary of his life, and I would encourage everyone to definitely go read up more. So then we have Dr. Borlaug's idea, a Nobel Prize for Food and Agriculture. Nobel's will, as I mentioned, prohibited the addition of new categories, so he found a sponsor in General Foods Corporation to establish the World Food Prize in 1986. Unfortunately, after a very short amount of time, General Foods Corporation withdrew its sponsorship, and Des Moines businessman and philanthropist John Ruan Sr., with the support of the governor and state legislature of Iowa, endowed the prize and moved it to Des Moines in 1990. All right, so we'll transition now to talking a bit more about the World Food Prize. So on the left there, you see an image of the physical award, which recreates the logo and the symbol. You can see it up at the top right-hand corner of the slide. And the image on the right there is of the 2018 Laureate Award ceremony. The World Food Prize is a $250,000 award given to a specific, exceptionally significant individual achievement that advances human development with a demonstrable increase in the quantity, quality, availability of, or access to food. A bit more about the award itself. Artist Saul Bass was contacted to design a commemorative piece for the World Food Prize. His only direction was to incorporate a bowl into the concept. Several months later, he presented the founding members of the World Food Prize with an earth-colored stone bowl made of alabaster, resting on a slate base with a pewter sphere sitting in the center. From the sphere, a wedge was removed and the exposed interior was cut with a leaf design. So again, if you need some reference, up in that right-hand corner, you can see the logo there where it's represented. The piece was exactly what the founders had hoped for, and the idea here is that the sphere symbolizes the world, the leaf design, its food, and the bowl that it sits in, which is not part of the logo, the nourishment of its people. And these are additional images from the Laureate Award ceremony, which is held in the Iowa State Capitol building here in Des Moines every October. The ceremony rivals that of the Nobel Prize, drawing over 800 people from more than 75 countries. And as you can imagine, it's been a little bit of a different situation with COVID the past couple of years, but we're all excited to get back on track. All right, so now we'll talk a little bit about the World Food Prize laureates. As you can see on the map here, the laureates come from countries around the globe. There's an international reach, and laureates have been from the countries you see highlighted there. There have been 51 laureates between 1987 and 2021. The first prize was awarded in 1987. So had 34 years of awards and recognition. I'll just give a little pause here so everyone gets a chance to look at the map there if they're interested. And I am not going to take the time to show you all 51 laureates, though they are definitely all worthy of being shared with you. So we're going to just focus on the first laureate, who was MS Swaminathan. You can see an image there on the left. And he developed and spearheaded the introduction of high-yielding wheat and rice varieties in India during the 1960s, when the country faced the prospect of widespread famine. So if you remember back to the biography or the story of Dr. Borlaug's career, MS Swaminathan and Dr. Borlaug worked closely together during Dr. Borlaug's time in India and Pakistan. And then the 2020 laureate, Ratan Lal, was celebrated actually last year due to COVID. So I'm including Dr. Lal here when we're speaking of our most recent laureates. Dr. Lal's work promoted innovative soil saving techniques, benefiting the livelihood of smallholder farmers. And also he is just a very engaging person to talk to, as they all are. And then the 2021 laureate was Shakuntala Haraksingh Tilstud. Her work drove transformations in aquatic food systems to deliver improved nutrition, resilient ecosystems, and the secure livelihoods for millions of people. And every laureate that has been awarded the prize, the information on their work in summary is located on the World Food Prize Foundation website. So I would encourage everyone to go take a look at what these amazing food security heroes have been working on and what they have contributed. A little bit more about the foundation. So we wouldn't be able to talk about the foundation itself without talking about the RUAN family. And as previously mentioned, in 1990, Des Moines businessman and philanthropist John RUAN Sr. and the RUAN family took over sponsorship of the World Food Prize, moving it to Des Moines and creating a foundation supported by an endowment. John RUAN III was the driving force behind efforts to acquire and transform the former Des Moines Public Library building into the Normandy Borlaug Hall of Laureates, the home of the World Food Prize Foundation, and where I am right now, sending out this webinar. To recognize the contributions of John RUAN III and his wife Janice, the garden at the Hall of Laureates was dedicated in their honor in 2016. And the garden is open to the public, so it's a beautiful place to have a bit of a green moment in the middle of downtown Des Moines. And this is our current president, Barbara STINSON. Barbara assumed leadership of the World Food Prize Foundation in January of 2020, building on a career of championing policy, research, and project innovations, becoming the second president of the foundation. And a little bit about what we do, what we come to work for every day. The Borlaug Dialogue, which is held annually, is considered the premier conference in the world on global food security. So it's an opportunity to bring in experts from around the world and from different fields to discuss what's going on in the world of agriculture and food security, and to get different perspectives from around the world from different disciplines, and to discuss solutions and how we can face the issues that are coming up and affecting people all over. We also host on a more local level, the Iowa Hunger Summit. So this started in 2006, and every year we gather between 500 and 700 leaders from across Iowa to lead or participate in projects to confront hunger on a local level. And more information on all of these programs, again, can be found on our website. In addition to the World Food Prize itself, there's also the Norman Borlaug Field Award, which is a $10,000 award given to an individual under the age of 40 for science-based achievement in international agriculture and food production. And this award presentation is held here at the World Food Prize or the Hall of Laureates. As I mentioned before, keeping youth engaged and involved in the conversations and the solutions for food security was something that was very important to Norman Borlaug. And one of the youth programming opportunities that the foundation offers are the youth institutes. So as you can see on the map here, we're taking Borlaug's dream to 22 states, which are listed there, as well as 4 countries, including which are Honduras, the Netherlands, Sweden, and the United States. There's also the Global Youth Institute, which is a chance for students from around the world to participate in the 3-day Global Youth Institute held here in Des Moines under normal non-COVID circumstances, and discuss pressing food security and ag issues with international experts, connect with other students, and take part in symposium discussions. So that is an image from the Global Youth Institute here in the Borlaug Ballroom at the Hall of Laureates. There's also the BORLAUG-RUAN International Internship, which provides a unique professional experience working with world-renowned scientists and policymakers at leading research and development organizations around the world. And these are all in summary, and I'm not including every program, but so apologies to any colleagues online if I'm missing any of your things, but this to give an idea of what it is we're doing here every day. Finally, we have the George Washington CARVER internship program. So these are going to be internships for college students located here at the Hall of Laureates. You can see the areas listed there. I can tell you that the archival internship is particularly excellent. So I hear, just kidding, all of them are excellent. Now we'll talk a little bit about the Hall of Laureates. As a tribute to founder Dr. Norman Borlaug and to provide an enduring foundation for all of the programs he created, the World Food Prize Foundation, led by former foundation president Ambassador Kenneth Quinn, took on a $29.8 million capital project to restore the century-old Des Moines Public Library building as the Dr. Norman E. Borlaug World Food Prize Hall of Laureates. The hall was dedicated on October 16, 2011, after a multi-year renovation. And here are some images from the renovation process. The stained glass in the dome is original to the building and has been restored, and they, just as an anecdote, they ended up taking it out and restoring each piece individually. It's about 10,000 pieces of stained glass. And that's an image of the renovated rotunda of the building. The Hall of Laureates is a magnificently restored Beaux Arts space celebrating the spirit of giving, emphasizing the importance of global food security. The building serves additionally as a world-class museum, an educational facility, a conference center and event space, and the headquarters of the World Food Prize Foundation. The building also is LEED Platinum certified, which is kind of an unexpected and really interesting feather in our cap, so to speak. It was awarded LEED Platinum certification by the U.S. Green Building Council, which is the highest possible rating for leadership in energy efficiency and environmental design. And it ends up being one of, and it kind of depends on this, I don't want to say statistics, but the qualifications you're looking at, but there are only a handful of buildings that are both on the historic register and have LEED Platinum certification. So it's a very difficult thing to achieve. So the hall is a model for salvaging historic treasures and transforming them into sustainable cutting edge facilities. And for those that are really interested in the ins and outs of our LEED Platinum certification, I will again direct you to our website, where all the details are presented in a much more technical fashion than I can and provide without notes. All right, so one special project that I have been working on in my role as kind of historian and archivist is researching the mural that we have on the ground level. And before I really kick off, I'd like to send out a special thank you to the reference staff and the team at the Des Moines Public Library, because the murals, the WPA mural, Social History of Des Moines, that we have on the ground level of our building, for us is an inherited piece, if you will. It was in the building. It was restored as part of the restoration, but it's not something that we commissioned. So getting to use the archives or the files at the Des Moines Public Library to be able to, for me to learn that story and be able to share it, since it's kind of become a shared piece of history, it's been really amazing. So thank you to the Des Moines Public Library staff for their help and enthusiasm as I researched this space. So I'll take a few steps back, I guess, before I jump right into this slide. We have, as I mentioned, in the building, the Works Project Administration WPA mural. So as I was researching some of the specifics of this, I ended up coming upon another mural discussed in the papers at the Des Moines Public Library. So some of this, as you'll see once we start into the timeline, is actually discussing a mural that was designed but was never actually painted. So we'll give you some contextual information in the timeline here. But December 8th, 1933, the Public Works of Art Project, or PWAP, for those familiar with New Deal projects, you have a lot of acronyms like this. This is a precursor to the WPA, starts under the Department of the Treasury. January 17th, 1934. And if you see a little asterisk, that means that that date is tied to a letter that is in the Des Moines Public Library's collections. So it's tied into a specific, like I said, communication about the murals. The Des Moines Public Library is contacted for blueprints by the Iowa PWAP. So the director of the project at that time was Grant Wood, to begin planning for a series of murals that would be located in the lunettes or the dome. There's a space, like 4 half-moon shaped areas there. April 25th, 1934, Grant Wood writes that PWAP funding is no longer available, but encloses snapshots of 4 lunette idea sketches and includes ideas for alternate funding. So this was a very short-lived project. As you can see, they open up the program in December of 1933, and by April of 1934, they're already saying, we've run out of money for these murals. In June of 1934, the Public Works of Art project officially ends, though at this point, most of the artists that had been hired have moved on to other projects, or at least no longer being paid by the government. However, we've not given up on this particular mural project here. So July 2nd of 1934, Grant Wood writes that government funding may continue to be available over the winter months from kind of the parent organization, the parent program, and that full-size drawings for 2 of the 4 panels are complete. So, and I will, again, these are images, these are the actual photographs that Grant Wood sent the Des Moines Public Library to show what the plans were going to be to fit in the lunettes there. So thank you to the Des Moines Public Library for allowing me to share this image with you. And I know it's small, but you can see there that they're very focused on people and the work people are doing. The names, in case they're difficult to read, are rural work in the upper left-hand corner there. We've got recreation, urban work, and unfortunately, my menu is covering up the top right-hand one. Activities is the second part. So this was the plan. This is what Grant Wood and his team were planning to paint into the lunettes in the dome underneath the stained glass that you saw earlier. As a kind of a visual to what the building looks like now. In the dome up there, you can see those half circle, see my mouse up here. So those are the lunettes, what they look like now with the current artwork, which we have tied into different times of Norman Borlaug's career, similar to the tapestries. But so those are the spaces where these lunette murals were going to go, designed by Grant Wood and his team. So October 22nd, 1934, their other project, which were murals up at Iowa State University, were formally presented. This was not something that was discussed in the correspondence, but I give it to you because it gives you a little bit of context for other projects and other artwork that the team was working at this point in time. And in December of 1934, the Des Moines Public Library, Forrest Spalding, in particular, the head librarian, writes asking if there's a possibility of the murals being completed. There is not a saved response to this from Grant Wood. In January 17th, 1935, Forrest Spalding sends another letter asking whether or not the murals will be completed. Just for the sake of information, the murals were being worked on at the University of Iowa. So it wasn't something where they were being painted directly onto the lunettes here. They were being painted on canvas at the University of Iowa and then would be installed here in the building once they were complete. Then we jump ahead to September of 1935. Grant Wood resigns from what at this point in time has become the Works Progress Administration. We jump ahead again to June of 1937. The WPA contacts Des Moines Public Library staff saying there will be an artist available in Cedar Rapids to complete the murals if requested. The Des Moines Public Library staff writes to Grant Wood asking if he will be involved, even though he's no longer working there, just because he had been so involved in the design of the murals to this point. And the answer was no, even though I don't have a letter saying that, but he had moved on to other projects. Then we move on. Instead of the lunettes, we end up with another project. So in September of 1937, artist Harry Donald Jones writes with plans for a social history of Des Moines, which is the name of his proposed mural. The letter included a label diagram of the children's library. So Harry Donald Jones had actually worked with Grant Wood on his team, so he was actually involved in the earlier designs as well. But after the departure of Grant Wood, Harry Donald Jones ended up stepping up into more of a leadership role in the Iowa WPA. So in May of 1938, Harry Donald Jones sends the Des Moines Public Library excerpts from a letter he wrote to his colleagues stating, more work needs to be done to complete the Des Moines Public Library murals, and that the lack of progress is an embarrassment, especially considering the library's disastrous experience a few years ago with government sponsorship. I put that in quotes because that is a direct quote from the letter. They're discussing the lunette murals, of course, that were never completed. In June of 1940, Forrest Spalding sends a very firm letter to the local WPA contact stating that if the work is not completed, there will be a lot of publicity regarding the two failed projects. At this point, the actual work had begun on the mural in 1937. So at this point, it's been almost 3 years. The mural was partially done. It was hard to use the library space because of scaffolding and artists coming in and out. So there was definitely some frustration about the fact that the piece had not been finished. So finally, by December 1941, between Forrest Spalding's begging and firm, I don't want to call it a threat, but he was very firm that it needed to be done. They ended up being able to call it a complete piece of art in December of 1941. For those that haven't had a chance to see it in person, I'm not going to show you the whole thing in hopes that it will lure some of you here to see the full mural in person. It's 1,091 square feet, 300. We say 360 degrees, but it goes around the circumference of what we call now the Des Moines Mural Room, but what would have been the Children's Library at the time. But this gives you kind of an idea of the artistic style, the colors, and kind of the social commentary. This would be considered the end of the mural, so the part of it leading to current times. They started with the spiral nebula theory. So basically the history of Des Moines from the creation of the universe to the contemporary time that the mural was created. So a little bit about the mural that we do have, funded by the New Deal Works Progress Administration, or WPA. Its social interpretation of Des Moines history was inspired by a quotation by author H.G. Wells, in which Wells proposes a new method to describe and explore history. One of the things that, to jump a little bit from the text you see, Grant Wood was known as a regionalist, and in kind of a departure from that, Harry Donald Jones, specifically in his letter to the library, said that he was not interested in just doing a regionalist piece for the sake of doing a regionalist piece. So he was definitely trying to establish himself and the department as being unique from Grant Wood, though they were both what we would have considered, or what we would consider modern artists, regional artists' work at that point in time. And that was something that was kind of controversial. When they selected this mural, a lot of people were more interested in having a more classical piece of art. So you can see in the second paragraph here, the mural portrays two primary themes. First, that social responsibility is superior to the individual accumulation of wealth. And second, that regional forms are preferable to imported European ones. So contrasting images of war and peace, simplicity and sophistication, greed and cooperation, producing an end result that not only portrays the specific history of Central Iowa, but also a broader social history of mankind. And it's truly, truly special that we have this piece. Just to kind of go back to the image here. Murals that were created at the same time, including one at the Iowa State Fairgrounds, many of them were destroyed because they were considered ugly or controversial in the terms of some thought that all these artists working on them were socialists or communists. So even the library mural was almost destroyed in 1951. So the fact that we are able to be caretakers and stewards of this mural is something that's very special. And in case anyone was wondering exactly what they're looking at, the summary of this section of the mural by historian and author Greg Narber, who has done a lot of study of murals in Iowa, describes, and this is kind of it's going from right to left, which I know is kind of the opposite of what we think, but it's showing a family turning from social disorder to order, especially New Deal order, and from chaos to security. On the more chaotic side, on the right there, we see a man in an ivory tower with blinders, so he's not looking at what's going on in the world around him. Hands clasp a banner, the lips, so you can see the idea of lip service. A pile of gold with a mask of falsity, so the idea of the biblical truth of the love of money is the root of all evil. Planes are soaring for war in the background. Smokestacks stand idle, figures whisper to symbolize power behind the scenes, secret deals. So you see the family turning from these bad social conditions to a bright world brought about by engaged, interested planners. You see social order symbols in the elderly receiving Social Security checks, conservation there on the right of fish being restocked, and social forums with both men and women, and also buildings in the back there that are built in a functional style instead of just fancy for the sake of being fancy. So more to come on the murals as I learn more and are able to share this. If you are interested in touring the hall, seeing the murals, seeing any of the artwork that I shared about, or learning more about our laureates, Norman Borlaug, or the work of the foundation, we're currently open for guided tours on Tuesdays at 9 a.m., 10:30 a.m., noon, and 1:30 p.m. I recommend checking our website and social media for the most up-to-date information, and also a virtual tour of the building if you're not able to come in person. And we will be having an upcoming announcement regarding Saturday touring hours. And then I will leave this connect with us screen up for anyone that is interested in checking out some of our social media channels. But with that, we'll turn it over to my good friend, Matt Beyer, for questions.
Well, thank you, Kate. We have time for questions right now. If you have a question, though, please submit it through the Q&A feature here on Zoom. But please note we may not be able to get to all the questions for end of our time together. So let's get started, Kate. One of our questions came through about the images you used in the beginning that are tapestries. And the question was, what is the size of those pieces?
I could send measurements. I don't have them up at the top of my head, but they're fairly good. They're, I would say they're probably taller than I am. So they're fairly good sized. They're large in person.
Perfect. A question more about the process of the World Food Prize and how it works. How are the laureates selected?
So there's more information about the nomination process on our website. So it's not part of the work that I'm directly involved in, but people are able to submit nominations and supporting materials, and then we have a nomination and a selection committee that work together to determine that. So, but I would definitely recommend checking out that information on our website so I don't misspeak.
A question about your work with the archives.
Yes.
What do you see as the future for the World Food Prize archives?
Oh, excellent question. So one thing that I would really like to move forward, I say me, but the foundation in general, is making our resources more available to the public. As I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, it's been primarily a business archive, so which generally means it's of more interest internally. But there are a lot of people, there's a lot of information that would be of interest to researchers, and whether they're high schoolers writing a paper or those in the food security field. So I'm really hoping that as we continue processing the collection, getting it into our database, that we're able to make the collection more available to the public and figure out ways that we can share the artwork, whether that's through textbooks or articles, using it and, you know, maybe in place of a photograph, something more more exciting like an art or a mosaic. So really working on sharing our resources and increasing different ways that we can use the building for community events is something that we are also looking into as well.
That's great. Talking more about your position in the archives, since you've been in your position, what is the most exciting or surprising item you found in the archive?
Oh man.
I know.
Well, a lot of it honestly is, I'm still getting acquainted with the material, to be totally honest. There's a lot of it, but we've had one interesting thing that I was able to share with our staff here. They kindly allow me to share different items. We call it for the record. And one article, there was, I shouldn't say article, there was a letter from Roswell Garst of Coon Rapids to the Ruan family, to a member of the Ruan family on the occasion of her wedding. So it was just kind of fun to read some personal connections there. You know, when we talk about the Garst farm and the visit by Khrushchev in a piece of art in our Iowa Art Gallery, which is not something I had a chance to talk about in this presentation, but something that's really interesting and fun to talk about for people that are able to come see the building. So just some big names in the history of Iowa ag and kind of humanitarian agriculture around the world. It was pretty interesting.
Another question we have is, most food insecurity is caused by international political conflict. Does the World Food Prize take into account politics, or is it mainly science-based?
So that would be a less of a question for me, perhaps. I pretty much stick to my history and archives, but in general, our goal is to be apolitical. So we are focused on solutions, broad-ranging solutions to food insecurity.
Wonderful. Now, if someone was looking for, you know, your findings in the archives, how would they go about getting that information from you or seeing copies of things?
Right now, the best way to do that is to send me an email, and that information is available on our website, or it's my first initial, so K Levasseur, my last name, which you see in the presenter information for this at worldfoodprize.org. And so if it was something that there's a topic and you were wanting to know if we had any resources that were shareable, then that would definitely be something you could contact me about, and I can look into it and see what there would be available that could be shared.
That's great. And I will also mention that there will be an email sent out with additional information and things like that as well post this program. So be on the lookout for that. That'll include some information in that as well. Another question we have, how have you seen Norman Borlaug's work and impact through the archives?
So one thing that's really an interesting kind of distinction for me is the World Food Prize Foundation Archive is not something, we are not a holder of, you know, Norman Borlaug's professional papers, for example, but it's easy to see his influence in, the work we do every day, not just the art, not just talking about his life, but the legacy of the youth programs, for example, is very strong. It's incredible to see what young people are capable of when given the resources and a forum. So I can't say enough good things about our youth programs, and getting to see the idea of the next Norman Borlaug, or working with our international dialogues team to see to raise up voices for scientists, researchers, and workers from around the world that may not have been given a platform otherwise. The amount of things I learn every day are fascinating and vast, and I couldn't be more impressed with my colleagues. And I know that Dr. Borlaug would be, impressed as well, and proud of the work that the young people and our laureates are doing every day in the world.
Well said. And I will also mention how wonderful it is, your love of educating children through the work at Living Tree Farms, and seeing that connection still with World Food Prize. That's a wonderful connection between the two as well. Discussing a little bit about the archives, digging a little deeper, we did have a question about some content. Do the archives include materials on Khrushchev's, I can't speak today, Khrushchev's visit to Iowa? Oh, forgive me.
I would say not specifically, in the sense if someone was researching it, if someone was doing a research paper on it, we definitely have the artwork as a resource to talk about it. But the way the archive is now, again, as a more of a business archive that is being, again, I'm working to expand it, but I would say that we could definitely use our artwork or information we have as a starting point for some of those, or to be additional supplemental information. But unfortunately, we're not at the point yet where we can be a broad-ranging, deep resource on all of these topics. But it's definitely assisting in a project like that would always be something that I would be happy to do.
That's wonderful. And this will be our last question for today. But how can the general public become involved and support the World Food Prize?
Sorry, I was taking a drink of water. Would you mind repeating that for me, please,
Yeah,
Matt?
of course. How can the general public become involved and support the World Food Prize?
Well, I think one thing that I am really excited about is just getting more people in the doors of the building to learn about what we do. Ashamed of myself to say now, but before I started working here, to be honest, did not know as much about it as I should have, being a hometown gal. So I really hope, especially as we're able to hopefully increase our touring, as knock on wood, COVID cases stay lower. I love to get people through the door to see our WPA mural, if that's your thing, but, come for the WPA mural, learn a little bit about George Washington Carver and Mahatma Gandhi's correspondence with each other up in our Iowa gallery, or we're always looking for volunteers for our Laureate Society. So if you like talking to people and learning about food security, food insecurity issues and ag issues, or if you have a background in that, I love to talk to you about volunteer opportunities. So I think start with your interests, send me an email, and we will figure out a way that you can become involved, whether that's, volunteering your time, just coming to visit and being, an informal ambassador, bringing visitors here that come to town. We love all of it. And I'm just so excited that I was able to be here today to share about my work this time for this webinar.
Well, we're happy to have you. And I will say at the second, the building is gorgeous. If you have not been, it is definitely worth the trip. And if the building isn't open, the gardens are equally as beautiful as well. I look forward to wandering through them after the markets this spring again. So with that answer, we'll bring the webinar to a close. I think we can all agree this has been a very informative lunch. And thank you to everyone joining us today. And again, I'd like to extend one last thank you to our presenter, Kate. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you so much, Matt and Jennifer. It was great to be here, and not talking about cemeteries this time, but we always have something fun to talk about.
Agreed. There's always something good to talk about. We hope everyone will sign up for the Iowa History 101 webinars that take place on the 2nd and 4th Thursdays throughout the year. There are many great stories from Iowa's past to tell in the upcoming months. Now, for more information and to register for future webinars in this series, check out our website at iowaculture.gov. This webinar and past presentations are available on our website as well. And while you're there, you can look into some other fantastic programs we have, such as our Goldie's Kids Club activities for young historians, or watch video recordings of the Iowa Stories series, which is hosted by our Iowa City branch. Now, we look forward to virtually seeing you here again on Thursday, April 14th. Thank you all again for joining us today, and have a great afternoon. Thank you.